Welcome to another episode of Learn with Lo. I am so excited to continue this body burden series, is what I'm calling it. And if you have been following along, you know that we are talking all things toxicity. Toxic burden, toxic load, some of these terms that you hear very frequently in more of the functional health, integrative wellness kind of space. But unfortunately, a lot of the conversations that I'm seeing and hearing around detoxification sound very fear-mongering, and they really kind of make it seem very overwhelming and something that feels like a consistent stress, right? Because we're consistently exposed to things that our body does deem as a toxin, something that it wants to use it and it wants to lose it. And that can be things in our environment, right? They can also be things endogenously that our body produces as toxins, and then it's on our body's major detoxification organs and glands to be able to stay on top of that process. So if you've been following along with this series, my whole goal of this body burden conversation is to make it less overwhelming and to make it more empowering, and for us to realize that yes, do we live in a world that presents us with a lot of different toxin exposures and potential toxin exposures? Yeah. Is our role not to necessarily fear those things or feel like we're going to somehow create an environment where we're bubble boy and we are able to avoid all of those? Hell no. Okay. It's not realistically going to happen. And I think the better conversation is how can we make our body the most resilient detoxer that it was designed to? Or even better yet, how can I remove some of the barriers that are preventing my body from being the best detoxer that it can be? So that's where we really introduced these concepts in the first two episodes of this series. Last week, we really dove into how to make my body the best detoxer. What organs and what glands are involved in that? Where are the most common bottlenecks and issues that I see come into my clinic with individuals that are presenting with very real conditions that are screaming toxicity concerns, right? Things like hormonal imbalances, estrogen dominance, thyroid dysfunction, chronic gut issues, autoimmune patterns. Like, these are people that I absolutely work up for toxicity concerns. So in today's part 3 of this series, I want to continue to make this conversation very practical. Like I said, something that feels simple and not overwhelming. And that is going to be us talking about what I have boiled down to be the 4 most powerful toxin swaps that you can start making in your everyday life, your everyday home, that have the biggest return on investment for the littlest amount of like stress and overwhelm. And so today's conversation is going to feel super practical of some of my favorite swaps, some of the things that I coach a lot of my patients to do as well too when they find themselves curious about some of these toxic exposures for themselves. And so to kind of introduce some of this conversation, I think the really neat thing that I have seen, if you are, again, like in the social media space around wellness and integrative health, there are actually conventional practitioners that are taking to their platforms and talking about these exact things. So I have seen where even oncologists, endocrinologists, rheumatologists, right, people that actually see individuals that have a lot of these conditions that I was speaking about, right? Hormonal imbalances, endocrinology, cancers, oncology, right? Rheumatologists deal with autoimmune patterns. So these are like the specialists in conventional medicine that do end up seeing some individuals with these types of like toxicity concerns, and they have taken to their social media platforms and they're making these really cool reels and videos and stuff talking about like, as an oncologist, these are 5 things that I won't allow in my own home. So I just think it's so cool because I'm like, yes, preach. Like, let's get more voices out there kind of talking about this. Now, usually that doesn't necessarily get followed up with a conversation of how do I make my body a good detoxer. It kind of just starts the comment section of people reeling about like, oh my God, all the toxins that I can't avoid, or like, you know, like I said, wrap myself and be a bubble boy and just like avoid these things forever. So unfortunately, I don't think it gets gets like the follow-up conversation that it needs to, which is what this platform is for. But I just like, if you haven't seen it, like this is getting into mainstream medicine. At least, like I said, conventional providers are willing to come to the table and admit some of the patterns that they've seen. And also some of the research that's coming out and the research that's in front of them that is really undeniable of the connections that we're seeing with toxicity concerns and some of the major, very common health patterns. So some of the things that like I said, we can all agree on, whether conventional medicine or functional medicine, is we're kind of all circling around the same things. Are we exposed to thousands of synthetic compounds every day? Yep. We sure are, right? And like I said, conventional medicine recognizes it. Functional medicine definitely recognizes it. We also are understanding that the cumulative effect of these micro exposures is not being adequately studied. We are studying some of these things in isolation, glyphosate versus endocrine disrupting chemicals versus plastics versus BPA, right? We're studying some of these things in isolation, but it's like the human experience is that you're going to get micro exposures from all of those different at the same time. And so even if like each one of those was found to be safe, to certain levels, what about when that real human experience actually has to detox all of those at once every single day? And also, I think we can all agree on what we are seeing clinically is rising rates of hormone disruption, rising rates of metabolic dysfunction, earlier onset cancers, fertility concerns, autoimmune patterns. Like all of this is correlating with like the different toxin exposures and the ways that is becoming honestly hard to ignore, if you ask me, right? And this isn't fear mongering. This is, to me, pattern recognition at its finest. And that is, like I said, something that from a medical perspective, I really pride myself on with my holistic medicine methods, is looking at patterns, looking at ratios and relationships. And I think it just deserves, like I said, a practical and empowering conversation versus something that feels like really scary or really overwhelming. So what we can at least agree on, and now that I've said it out loud, your algorithm will probably connect you to some of these conventional practitioners that are making some of these videos. You might hear some similarities between what they have kind of seen and some of the things that I'll talk about today too, as some of my practical swaps. But at least for us to level set, I think it's important for us to understand, okay, before we know what swaps we can make, or before we know what toxin exposures are probably making the biggest impact on us, I think it's helpful for us to understand how we get exposed to these things in the first place. So let's just kind of, like I said, high level overview. Some of these things will be blatantly obvious, but I think it's important to set the stage, because then when I present to you guys like my 4 major categories, you'll understand why I go after those 4, because of how we're exposed to them or how frequently we're exposed to them. So there's really kind of 3 main paths that we get exposed to toxins from our outside world, right? This is only talking about exogenous toxins, not necessarily the endogenous toxins that we create because our gut health sucks. That's for a different conversation. But for outside influences, really route number 1 is inhalation. So through breath, like through the nose, or obviously breath through the mouth, breathing in things like fragrances, candles, cleaning product fumes, off-gassing of like new furniture, flooring, paint, right? You kind of move into a new house and you're kind of getting a lot of the inhalation exposure. So a lot of these things that we do inhale, they directly enter the respiratory system and then they're going to get diffused into the bloodstream. So inhalation, very popular route. This also bypasses the liver. So when we inhale, it gets directly absorbed into the bloodstream. The liver doesn't even get a first pass at it first, which means the liver normally would get the first crack at like neutralizing it. It doesn't get to do that through inhalation. So you could see where it's like, oh, things that are inhaled probably are going to be part of that like kind of top swap. Yes, because I don't get the help of my liver to partially neutralize that before it enters my bloodstream. So inhalation is one. The route number 2 is through transdermal absorption, meaning anything that we put on our skin or anything that our skin comes into contact with. That's going to be what we call transdermal absorption. So the skin is permeable. This is not like a rock solid barrier. Some things get in, some things stay out. So think like lotions, perfumes, deodorants, makeup, sunscreen, laundry detergent residue or dryer sheets, like all of that is absorbed transdermally, right? The one place that I think a lot of females forget about is transdermal absorption is the vagina. Very, very dense in terms of absorption capacity there. So even more so than like external skin. So this is where menstrual product choices become exponentially important as well too. So route 1 is inhalation, route 2 is transdermal, route 3 is through ingestion, like you eat it, okay? So it comes in usually through the mouth is that major pathway. So think like food and how, like what the food is sprayed with, or how we store our food, what we store our food in, water contaminants as well, like heavy metals or forever chemicals, pharmaceutical residue, pesticide runoff that's in the water, right? All of those types of things. So that's where we think about, again, when you even hear that, you're like inhalation, transdermal, ingestion, you're like, well, you know, that's where some of the fear and overwhelm can come in. And trust that we are exposed to these things every day. Yes, the cumulative effect of this is what we need to study more. And even more so, what we need to do is make our body a more resilient detoxer. But I think it's just, we can't deny the fact that like we haven't studied the cumulative effect. And if you look at like health trajectory over time, we are seeing declining testosterone rates in males. We are seeing puberty arriving much earlier in females, some even looking at like 8 and 9-year-old girls starting their first menstrual cycles. Fertility rates are declining across the board. Thyroid dysfunction is on the rise. Early onset hormone sensitive cancers are on the rise. And it's like, if we see conventional medicine that's like starting to recognize this, like that means that this is something that you'll hear more and more about, but I don't want it to be fearful. I want it to feel very empowering, very practical. And so that way you feel like you are doing and controlling what you can and feeling really good about that sector of your overall health plan. So now that we know how we're exposed to it, this will make so much more sense as we introduce the 4 most powerful swaps that I feel like you can start to audit in your own life, your own home right now with minimal amount of overwhelm, because I'm going to give you some really practical solutions for this too. So we cannot control everything. We're not going to try to control everything, but what we can do is identify like our highest frequency exposures, our highest burden exposures, and try to swap those first. So I wouldn't say that any of these 4 are really in any particular order, but number 1 is going to be kitchen swaps. So usually the first place, if you haven't had any sort of any sort of awareness around this toxicity conversation, usually auditing your kitchen is the first place to go, because you think of like you eat and drink multiple times a day. So it's a very high frequency exposure. Also, there's heat involved in the kitchen through cooking or reheating processes, and heat drastically accelerates any like leaching of chemicals into your food or your liquids. And we also like travel with a lot of these things, like travel with water bottles or travel with food storage containers. So I think some of the biggest things to audit here would be glass over plastic whenever possible. So swapping out any plastic storage containers, especially things that you store leftovers in, or things that are going to hold water or beverages, or things that you actually like cook in or reheat in. Those types of things for sure, like food storage containers and water bottles, trying to make those more glass or stainless steel. definitely worth the swap. And even like glass storage containers now really have like become a lot more economically priced than they used to be. So swapping out plastic for glass, stainless steel water bottles, stainless steel or cast iron cookware. Start with what you use daily. Those are always the great ones to kind of audit there, or anything, like I said, that gets heated in those regards. One of my favorite ways to do this is to start to save glass storage containers that your typical foods come in. So that way you don't feel like you have to buy like fancy dancy glass containers. Like you have a pickle jar and the pickle was a glass jar. Cool. When the pickles run out, don't just throw it away, but clean the pickle jar, take the label off and just store it, right? Then you can store like anything that you want, even in something like a pickle jar, you can drink out of a pickle jar, right? So try to save some of the glass containers of things that food just naturally comes in, whether it's a glass bottle, a glass jar, those are great ones, or like salsa or spaghetti sauce usually come in some sort of glass container. Start saving them. That's such an easy hack to just get some of the plastic cups, plastic water bottles out of the room and start to exchange for some of the glass. So the kitchen is number one, kind of swapping plastics for glass where you can. Swap number two is fragrances. So then you're going to move from the kitchen to the laundry room is usually the next stop. So thinking about things like laundry detergent, dryer sheets, or any sort of just like home fragrances like plug-ins, especially like room sprays, fabric sprays, things that we just do to make our fabrics smell good. Okay? We are obsessed with like things smelling good, but it really does wear on that inhalation process. So I think about really anything that is like has a fragrance to it, like even trash bags have fragrance. I'm like, what are we doing? Why does my trash bag need to smell like lavender, right? So fragrance on any sort of ingredients label, or you'll know things that are heavily fragranced. Usually these contain what are called phthalates, and phthalates are known to suppress testosterone in men and amplifies more estrogen activity in women. So women with endometriosis, fibroids, fibrocystic breasts, estrogen sensitive cancers, auditing their home for fragranced items like number one. Candles, air fresheners, dryer sheets, laundry detergent, cleaning products, perfume, cologne, like get the fragrance out. Like you said, your sheets don't have to smell like a tropical breeze, right? They're clean. They don't need to, like I said, have like a fragrance that we're like rolling around in 8 hours a night. So you kind of get double whammy because you inhale it, but it's also passed through the skin transdermally as well too. So I think this is just a really valuable place to start. Fragrance-free laundry detergents you can swap out. Instead of dryer sheets, you can get like a wool dryer ball that literally will last you the rest of your life. And you can just, if you want it to smell good, the wool dryer ball just takes the static out of it. But the wool dryer ball, if you add essential oils to it, it smells good. You can get like peppermint, eucalyptus, you can get citrus scent, you can get lavender, but then you can just, like I said, use a couple drops or a little bit of like an essential oil spray on the dryer ball and then put it into the dryer, and you don't need dryer sheets, right? You can swap a lot of these like fragrance toxins for things that are going to feel a lot better that you're inhaling, and things that you're like wearing as well too. So just know that those swaps do make a really big difference. So like I said, number one was looking at our kitchen and swapping out anything plastic for glass. Number two was anything fragranced, specifically in our laundry room around that we're washing our clothes in or washing our sheets in. Number three is for my females out there, and that's your menstrual products. Okay, so we talked about how the vagina is such a very absorptive tissue within the female body. And if you do any sort of rabbit hole digging around like tampons and classic tampons, most of them are bleached. Some of them are even fragranced. And in that they a lot of times also are not like 100% cotton. They're usually some sort of synthetic absorbable plastic. So I just think that this is just a travesty to women's health in general, because monthly, like you think about that, like maybe an average female might go through 3 or 4 tampons a day over a 5-day period. That's 20 tampons every month. And if they are bleached, fragranced, and plastic, and we're putting them directly into the vagina, and then we're questioning why we have female hormone issues, like it kind of tracks, you know? So just trying to, like I said, look for products that are 100% cotton, things that are not fragranced at all. If you are open-minded to using things like menstrual discs or menstrual cups, that can drastically help reduce a lot of that toxin burden that comes from your classic menstrual products as well too. So am I gonna lie and say that those tampons aren't slightly more expensive? Yes, they are slightly more expensive. So that's something to where only you can know whether that's something that you feel like you have the wiggle room to invest in. But I would at least throw it out there, especially if you are a female that has a lot of heavy cramping. That's probably been the easiest thing, is I get a female that swaps her menstrual products out and her cramps go from a 10 to a 7, a 10 to a 6, right? For some women, it's not the only thing that we're discovering as their estrogen detoxification. But if that's a really simple lever to pull, it's worth it. Absolutely worth it. Okay, the 4th category is your water. Okay, this to me is kind of a bonus one, because some people are at that level where they're ready to have this conversation. Some people, it just feels, like I said, a little bit too out there, a little bit too overwhelming. That's okay. This could be water for sure that you drink. This can also be water that you shower in as well. So there's water filtration systems for taps and faucets. There's water filtration systems for your shower head as well too. Really what we're going for here is, like I said, that transdermal exposure, or you probably ingest some of the water too as you're showering or washing your face in it, or obviously if you're drinking it, you're ingesting the water too. But usually the things that are in tap water are going to be your heavy metals, your chlorine, your fluoride, any sort of runoff that we're getting, pesticide residue, agriculture residue like pesticides as well. So yes, do I see individuals who do, like I said, have some of those heavy metal toxicity patterns, usually getting it from their water supply? Yep. 9 times out of 10, yes. So some people opt for, like I said, sink attachments. Some people opt for shower head attachments. Some people opt for like a separate pitcher that they fill through a filtration device as well too. I personally don't think a whole home system is absolutely necessary. Some people are at that place in their health where they have controlled for so many things, or depending on the status of their public water supply, they might choose to do a whole home filter. I'm not here to say like that's where you have to start. I'm saying like swap a little bit of some plastic for glass, swap out your menstrual products, swap out some fragranced items that you like wash your clothes in or wash your bed sheets in, because these aren't like heroic overhauls, but they are very targeted because they're the high frequency exposures. They're the high, again, like transdermal or inhalation kind of exposures that I feel like really do compound over time as well too. So like I said, these swaps just help reduce some of the incoming load from the outside. The system that we are building from the inside then handles the rest. And that's kind of the beauty of how these can really complement each other across the board. Awareness, not overwhelm. That is the goal here, okay? So if you feel like you're kind of resonating with, again, some of these conditions that are very closely tied to toxicity concerns, this is where, and you don't feel like you've really had a valuable conversation of how to make your body a better detoxer, how to audit whether it is more of an exogenous or more of an endogenous toxin exposure that's happening. click the link in my bio, schedule yourself a functional wellness consult where we can run some labs together and actually sit down and have that deeper dive conversation that you've been looking for. Otherwise, tune in next week because we'll have another episode to really round out this body burden series for all of my practitioners out there.